Welcome to Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now you can learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property. Learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau with the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denisi, and Corker. He's a member of the Committee on Professional Ethics of the Bar Association of Nassau County and counsel to the Nassau Academy of Law. And now, here is your host for Law You Should Know, attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today we'll be discussing a very important topic, and we'll be offering tips on buying or selling a house. There's so much to cover when it comes to real estate, so we're just going to provide tips and a general overview. And my special guests are attorneys, husband and wife, David and Sherli Saed, and they concentrate in real estate and also handle other areas of law, and they have offices in Jericho, Long Island, New York, but handle real estate matters all over the New York area. Sherli and David, welcome back to Law You Should Know.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay. Nice to be here.
David, if someone is buying a house, what are some important things they need to know, and if they're a lawyer, that they should help their client discuss with the client about getting the mortgage and dealing with a mortgage broker or a bank?
Well, the first thing they should know is the liquid assets that they have in order to make a decision as far as what they can afford, a price point to purchase. And they should know their credit to make sure that they would be able to qualify with getting a mortgage from a bank. Then their attorney or their bank representative could advise them on the different type of mortgages that are available, whether they're conventional, FHA, or VA mortgages. And if they're going to put down a small down payment, less than 20%, then they would need what's called the PMI, which is a private mortgage insurance.
Which is an extra expense.
Correct. So it's best if they can to save at a minimum 20% to make a purchase, although at this day and age, they don't need to have 20% to make a purchase.
And it's important also that some people use a mortgage broker to assist in the process of obtaining a mortgage and sometimes come out with a better deal that way.
Well, at times they could, because mortgage brokers deal with different lenders versus going to Chase, Bank of America, or Citibank that will give you only their products versus going to mortgage brokers that deal with different lenders, and they will provide them with the different programs that would best suit that individual.
And perhaps give some choices.
Correct.
Okay, and it's important in choosing a real estate broker. People should be aware of the difference between a buyer's broker and a seller's broker.
Correct. A real estate broker, there's a buyer's broker that's representing the buyer's best interest, similar to when you're purchasing a house or selling. The seller has their own attorney, the buyer has their own attorney. So a real estate broker, you want to make sure that the buyer broker is being represented for the buyer and has the buyer's best interest in mind.
And generally, a seller's broker is going to represent the seller.
Correct.
And a buyer's broker is going to put the buyer's interest first.
Correct.
And there's a difference also between having a listing broker and a selling broker. So this is a issue where most people don't understand that when they have their broker, they go to a brokerage place and they say, okay, well, I want to buy a house. Everybody, unless they tell you otherwise, they are the seller's broker. Even if they are your broker who are showing the houses to you, they are the seller's broker. In other words, they have the seller's interest at mind. So the client should really know and understand what the difference is between a buyer's broker and a seller's broker. The listing broker who lists list the property is definitely working for the seller. But other brokers are also working for the seller, the selling brokers, unless they specifically say that they're the buyer's broker. And generally, if you're representing family or friends, you have to represent to the listing broker that you are a buyer's broker because you have the buyer's interest at heart. But most brokers are selling brokers.
But it is possible to find a buyer's broker out there who, help show you around and help you negotiate and everything to get you into that house.
Yes, and if you find a good buyer's broker, it's the best because they represent your interest. Just like your attorney represents your interest, the buyer's broker represents your interest.
And you won't necessarily be paying any more for it because they will somehow split the commission.
It's the same commission. It's just a matter of notifying the listing agent that you are representing the client as a buyer's broker rather than a seller's broker.
Okay, what about in terms of finding the right property, Sherli?
Well, if you have the right buyer's broker, they can show you the different properties. Sometimes you find a property on your own and you pursue it. But there's a lot, and I've learned this through David since he's an appraiser. I've learned a lot about what's important in purchasing a house. For example, you've heard the words location, but I never understood what that really meant until I, learned more and more about this field. And the first location that would matter is the school district, because most people, you want to buy a house that when you want to sell it, you can easily sell it. So if the house is located in a district where the school district is good, then when you want to sell your house, it's very easy to sell it. But if it's in a bad school district, most people, it's not desirable. The second location is where the town or village or the city is, versus, for example, as an example, Jericho School District is very sought out. But you could go into Westbury and buy the property, or you could go to Old Westbury and buy the property, and the prices are very different.
It's important to find out, even if the mailing address could be one town, but the schools could be in another. So it's very important to find out the school district and also which elementary school your kid would be zoned for.
Right, and then the town. And then the third location is actually where the house is situated on the street, whether, you're getting access to sun. If it's a corner property, it's not desirable because you really don't have a backyard. If you, there's certain things that, you can look for depending on where the house is. Like if the house is at a T where, everybody who drives, their lights, point to your window every night, that's not desirable. But if it's in a cul-de-sac, that's desirable. Things like that.
And also, it could be important to some people to be near main roads or highways, and also how expensive taxes are in that locality.
Well, those are all things that you have to take into consideration. But as far as location, the reasons those are important is it helps you be able to sell the property quicker if you need to.
You'll get your investment back.
Yes.
And there are so many things to cover, so I just want to touch on some of the main important ones. What advice would you offer someone in choosing a real estate attorney?
Well, one, you should definitely find an attorney who does real estate. A lot of times I have, I deal with people, either sellers or buyers, who have attorneys who are not, their family who are attorney or whatever, it's not a real estate attorney, and they don't know what they're getting themselves into, because when you don't know real estate law, you don't know what the ups and downs are and how to best protect your client.
And you also want an attorney who's available to address your concerns and will respond to them.
Definitely, somebody who cares.
Okay, and what about advice on signing binders? should a buyer sign a binder?
We don't. We always advise our clients not to sign any binders, and if you want to, you have to definitely ask your attorney before you do, because it just binds you for for unnecessary reasons.
Right. So everyone buying real estate should get advice from their attorney about what to do about binders, because lawyers may have different opinions about it. And on this show, we're just giving you general advice, and you should confirm it. What your attorney says is best practices. What's going to happen after you've reached a deal, David?
Well, once the price is negotiated between the brokers, then the attorneys get involved, and the seller's attorney is the one who's preparing the sales contract to be sent to the purchaser's attorney. And the seller's attorney gets together with the seller to make sure that he gets a copy of the deed at the time the seller purchased the house, to make sure everything is in order. The certificate of occupancy on the house is existing, and if the owner had made any improvements or changes but didn't apply for the correct permits, then they got to make sure to put everything in the contract to cover the seller, because it's not at the time where you send out the contract and they do what's called a title search and they find out all the issues with the house. If there was a deck added that didn't have a permit, now you have to make sure that you're able to deliver the property to the purchasers with all the right permits, certificate of completions, in order to be able to convey the property to the purchaser.
Okay, Shirley?
Basically, as a buyer or seller, you should tell your attorney everything that's wrong with your house. And you have to tell them before they go into contract,
so they can help you straighten them out, because they'll have to get straightened out sooner or later, and if it's later, it's going to just delay everything.
It delays and could really cause a lot of damage down the road. But if you, in the beginning, if you come out and tell your attorney these are the problems with the house, then the attorney can protect you as a seller right from the start, or basically know what things that they will accept or what things that they won't accept. For example, if you don't have a CO, by not telling the buyer, you could take a chance. Or you could say up front, like, I'll give you a credit, and that's it. It's end of story. Do not bring up this issue of there's no CO on the house.
David?
The only thing that you have to consider, if the buyer agrees to purchase it without the certificate of occupancy, that if you're going to a lender that will require you to have the certificate of occupancy or certificate of completion, even though you had an agreement with the purchaser, then either the seller or the buyer has to take it upon themselves to make sure that certificate is obtained from the municipality. Otherwise, the lender will not proceed to give the funding on it.
And if you buy it as it is, you're just going to you're kicking that can down the road, and you're going to probably have to get it before you can sell it again.
Correct.
And straighten everything out. And also, the buyer has to look around. Is there a shed there, a deck, a room that looks like it was expanded or enclosed, or the house was built up, or alterations, and let their attorney know about that.
And you should do a survey. You should, if there is no survey on the property, definitely get an updated survey. And even if there is a survey, you should get an updated survey, because things could have changed.
Okay, David?
Yeah. Well, what I recommend is before the whole transaction starts, they should really do an engineer's inspection to make sure that the house is structurally sound and anything else that could be wrong with the property, because some of the things that by law that the seller has to deliver to the buyer is the house has to be free of any roof leaks or basement leaks, and also
the plumbing,
electrical have to be in working order. So you want to make sure, and the heating, of course, as well, has to be in working order. So you want to make sure that these things are from the get-go, everything is working, and if not, then you can put that in the contract so it protects the purchaser from buying a house that might have these issues.
So just to summarize, if you're the seller and you know you have potential problems or you think you might, you should let your attorney know on day one. And if you're a buyer, if you see something, say something to your attorney so they can prepare for and deal with those problems. We're talking with Sherli and David Saed about tips on buying a house, and they're experienced real estate lawyers with offices in Jericho and handle property all over the New York area. You're listening to Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, and also over the internet at nccradio.org. We'll be back in a moment.
This program is brought to you by Nassau Community College, which offers a paralegal studies program. Students can major in paralegal studies while earning their associate's degree, or earn a paralegal certificate if they already have a college degree. These programs can even help you start a second career as a paralegal. It's a program for anyone who wants to work in a law office assisting lawyers, the government, or a position in an insurance company. More information about full-time, part-time, days, evenings, weekends, or online courses is available by calling 516-572-7774 or by email at paralegal@ncc.edu.
Once again, we continue with Law You Should Know. From the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denise, Corker, and Sauer, here is attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome back to Law You Should Know. We're talking about tips on buying or selling a home. Our guests are attorneys Sherli and David Saed. They are experienced real estate attorneys who represent buyers and also sellers, and also help with other aspects of buying or selling real estate. Keep in mind, whatever they say is presented as information only. You must get advice for your situation from your own attorney. And it's important to have your own attorney, if you're a qualified attorney, if you're buying or selling property. David, you mentioned about homeowner inspections. If someone has environmental concerns about the house, asbestos or radon or anything else, or they're concerned about there may be an oil tank used now or in the past, what else should they do?
Well, with regard to the oil tank, you can contact the Department of Health in Nassau County. They have a list whether the oil tanks have been abandoned legally with a permit, or whether there was ever an oil tank there or not. Because you want to make sure with today's problems with oil tanks leaking that you don't have any environmental issue with it. If there is lead in the house, you're given an opportunity for 10 days to do a lead inspection and to make sure that there is no existing lead or problems, if especially you have children coming into the house. So it's very important to do all your safeguards before you sign a contract, because once the contract is signed and you discover something and you haven't made it a part of the agreement, then there's no going back to revising it.
So if it's not mentioned in the agreement, you could be stuck with it.
Correct.
And it's also very important to, I know I said that with the seller's attorney, but with the buyer's attorney, you should definitely make sure that all the property has CO, certificate of occupancy. Any additions, any improvements have certificate of occupancy. You don't want to buy the house without it.
Right. And if someone's worried about termites or sees evidence of termite damage, that's something else they also want to inspect for.
Well, with the termite, again, at the time the engineering inspection is done, most inspectors also do the termite inspection. If there is existing termites, then it is the responsibility of the seller to either take care of it and give a 1-year warranty, or pay for the cost of treating it and getting a 1-year warranty.
But that's something that can usually be worked out between the buyer and seller.
It's usually in the contract.
It has to be covered in the contract.
They usually say within 10 days after the 10 days or whatever day you agree to, that after the contracts are signed, you have the ability to tell them about it.
If the buyer and seller overcome all these hurdles, they're going to sign the contract, and then is the buyer going to give some money as a deposit?
Well, at the time of contract, typically there's 10% that's put down as a down payment, and the other 90% is required at the time of closing, whether it's the remainder is paid in cash, whether it's bank financing or additional 10% cash coming from the purchaser, and then the 80% being financed by the lender.
Okay, now the buyer is going to have to apply for a mortgage?
Correct.
So what can they do to speed up that process?
Well, prior to starting to even shop for a house, you should really go either to a mortgage broker or a lender in order for them to look at your income, look at your credit, and see what you qualify for, because there's no point in making an offer on a house and then find out that you don't qualify for the monthly payments based on the income or based on the fact that your credit is insufficient in order for you to qualify for that amount of loan.
And if you can always work ahead of time, if you know you're going to buy a house in 2 or 3 years, you can start saving, you can start trying to improve your credit report.
Most of the time when you make an offer to a seller, they want what's called a pre-approval letter, which basically you've given your credit information and your income to either a broker or a lender. They qualify you and they tell you with, let's say, $100,000 down payment, you can also get a $400,000 financing, so you could purchase a house that's priced at approximately $500,000. And once you go into contract, typically you have either 30 to 45 days in order to get a mortgage, which is called a mortgage contingency, that if within that time frame you cannot get the mortgage, then you can get your down payment refunded within the agreement that's set forth in the contract again.
And it's advantageous for a seller, as you mentioned, to look for someone who's pre-qualified for the house or for financing, and it's good for a buyer. They'll be more acceptable if they have that pre-approval letter.
Correct, because the seller obviously doesn't want to take their house off the market and go into contract with someone who can't complete that transaction, and there's really no point for the buyer into entering into a contract if they're not even aware whether they can afford to make that purchase.
Okay, and Shirley, what else is the attorney for the buyer going to do after the contract is signed?
The buyer's attorney has to order title insurance to make sure that title is clear. And what title insurance is important because it basically tells you the history of the property up until that date. So it's actually insurance that goes to the past rather than to the future. So it checks to make sure that the owners who are selling the property are the actual owners. And if they are not if there's fraud happening down the road, if the real owners come back and say, this is my property, how did you get it, and so on, that's what title insurance comes in and protects the new buyers. So it might
protect you against identity theft.
Identity theft, and also if there's mortgages on the property, the title company has to turn it out so that it gets paid at closing. If they don't turn up liens or mortgages or judgments, and then later on it's found, then the title company is responsible because they are responsible to turn all of that out and make sure that it's been cleared before, at closing. So once that title it gets cleared and the buyer gets the mortgage commitment, then you set a date for closing and you close as soon as possible. The buyer's attorney should close as soon as possible, because sometimes there is a possibility that a bank will give out a commitment and the commitment date expires, so the buyer has to buy. But when they come to closing, for any reason, the bank could take that away and say, I'm not funding this. And then the buyer would lose their down payment. So this is a risk. So the sooner you close, the better, because there's less chance of the bank pulling the mortgage back. And the other thing I wanted to add was that as a seller's attorney, you want the buyer to put the maximum amount down and to get the least amount of mortgage. So whoever offers them if they want to get the least amount of mortgage and the highest down payment, that would be the best for the seller. But for the buyer, the best thing to do is to put the least amount down, so that in case there's a default or there's a reason that they can't close, they only lose that down payment, which would be less. The more down payment they put, the more the chances for them to lose it is higher.
And
not the chance is higher, but that if they lose it, they're going to be losing more
money. And so both the buyer's attorney and the seller's attorney and the buyer and the seller should follow the progress of that mortgage being approved by the bank. That's very important to everyone.
Yes.
Correct, because at the time you apply for the mortgage, the first thing that the bank does is obviously they take all your income documents, your credit report, but they also order an appraisal to make sure that the property has value before they give funding.
Okay, and we just have a moment or two left in the program. Just tell us a few words about tips for the buyer or seller at the closing. Just the general tips.
Well, as far as the buyer, it's very important to make sure you get your COs for all the improvements. It's important to make sure there's no oil tank leaks or there's termite damage or
and do a last minute inspection.
Damage. Right, you do a within 24 hours you do an inspection, whatever is wrong.
24 hours before
the closing. You let your attorney know. However, if you didn't mention them in the contract in the beginning, you might not be able to bring them up. That's why it's very important to bring all your concerns to your attorney at the time of contract.
And David, very briefly, are there any last minute things the seller should do before the closing, before they hopefully get their check?
Well, they want to make sure that they've complied with everything that they agreed to in the contract. They should really listen to their attorney's advice and not go with what they think is best. The attorney has the experience and has been doing it long enough to give them the best advice.
And so they should, any concerns the buyers or sellers have, the time to bring it their attorney is before the closing.
Before the contract.
But assuming they're moving along to the closing, if they have any other
issues,
last minute concerns, once if they're not resolved before or at the closing, they're going to lose their ability to deal with it.
Yes.
Right. Once the closing is over, that's it. There is no going back unless there was fraud involved.
Okay. Any other final tips you'd like to offer buyers and sellers? Just about 20 seconds.
I also like to get possession for my buyers, my clients who are buyers. I like to get possession at closing. I do not like sometimes the seller wants to keep the property after closing. I generally do not like to do that unless
and that's usually covered by the contract.
Yes.
Or unless some last minute agreement between the parties. Okay, I'd like to thank our guests, real estate attorneys David and Sherli Saed, with offices in Jericho. They're very experienced in real estate and all aspects of real estate law and resolving real estate problems, and also have a general practice. Keep in mind, whatever you've heard is presented as information only, and you should get advice about your situation from your own real estate attorney. If you want to, you can hear this program again by listening to the podcast, which is available at no charge at nccradio.org. And we invite you to tune in next week for another program on law you should know at 90.3 FM, the voice of Nassau Community College, or over the internet at nccradio.org.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.